Hello, I'm Kieran Devlin, CX editor at CXM, and I'm delighted to be joined on today's show by Sid Banerjee, Chief Strategy Officer at Medallia. Today, we're here to dig into what's actually working and not working as the industry races ever onward towards agentic AI and closed-loop automation. Sid, thanks for being here today.
Thank you for having me, Kieran. It's great to be here.
Before we explore today's topic, can you please tell us a little about yourself, Sid, and your Medallia journey?
Sure. Actually, my journey at Medallia began about 19 months ago, but I'll go back a bit further. My journey in the CX world actually began after just shy of a decade in the analytics space. I worked way back for a company called MicroStrategy. They were one of the early business intelligence vendors. And after leaving that company in the early 2000s, I founded a consultancy that ultimately became an incubator for the creation of a company called ClaraBridge. ClaraBridge is one of the first, and this is sort of the 2006 to 10 timeframe, one of the first companies to really apply advanced analytics to customer experience. We collected calls and chats and surveys and social media and created a kind of an aggregate view of a customer's interests and emotions and loyalty markers and such. We built that business up over about a decade and a half to about 150, about a little over 100 million actually in revenue, and ultimately ended up selling it to another big CX player who I'm sure a lot of people know, called Qualtrics. Spent a few years at Qualtrics, took some time off and failed at retirement, and then ultimately Mark Bischoff, who is the CEO here at Medallia, and he and I had worked together also at ClaraBridge, wanted to bring the team back together to try to help, take Medallia into the age of AI. And it was a compelling offer. And so I came back to work, and I've been here ever since.
Terrific. Well, I think that breadth of experience positions you nicely for today's topic. And I think our keen viewers and readers of CXM will be very aware about the gulf in AI between investment and hype versus the ROI and meaningful productivity. This is not a new topic, but Medallia's research is quite alarming in the extent of it. I think there was quite a stark figure that only 5% of enterprise AI pilots are generating meaningful value.
Yeah.
What would you say, Sid, is blocking the other 95%? And is the problem fundamentally one of the technology, organizational design, or something else entirely?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that that research came out almost a year ago now. So, and in current age of AI innovation, my first reaction is I think that the headline is still notionally correct, though the specific details are actually changing quite rapidly day to day. But there is I think the key takeaway is pilots, right? What we've found, and certainly as we've AI enabled the Medallia product stack, we found that AI is very good at, if you're building it really from the ground up as a development pilot or building your own product, it's very good at prototyping. It's very good at developing proofs of capability. But to build an actual production system, the old kind of rules of development and testing and governance and security and making sure that you're kind of blending deterministic and kind of inference-based technologies to make sure that you're using each capability for what it's good at. Those rules still apply when you're building a production grade product. So I think that the journey that we're on with a lot of our customers is not to use AI to build a ground up platform, but to use AI for what AI is good at, and then to use a lot of the best practices around how you build a strong enterprise grade CX solution, and to ground that in a mix of AI and non-AI technologies. And I'll give you a few examples, right? So for Medallia, the typical Medallia customer deploys the solution out often to tens of thousands of users, right? If you look at a big retailer or a big bank or a big telco, they're not using Medallia just for data science analysis, right? They want to collect feedback. They want to distill markers of loyalty, issues, and push them out to frontline workers that may be at a store or a bank or a hotel location. And building a scalable solution requires you collect the data in a good way, that you connect the data so that no matter where it comes from, it goes to the right person. You use AI to infer what is being said, what that indicates, what the root cause is, maybe what the recommended action might be. And then ultimately, you you create an infrastructure that pushes the right information to the right person in a scalable, secure, and predictable way. And that's not something you can do with a pilot, right? That's something that actually does take time to design and build. What we are finding, though, is that when you layer AI on top of those enterprise-grade applications, you get a ton of value. And that's been a big part of our journey over the last really 18 to 24 months, is first use AI to automate the analysis, right? The second is where you have good analytics already, use agents to basically program the Medallia platform so that it can do things based on your human interaction with a technology. You don't have to build it yourself, it'll build it for you. And then the third is make sure that you layer that on top of a governable, secure, and scalable solution, which today a lot of that is still built on the traditional kind of software development models. But increasingly, I think we will be evolving that with AI. And that takes months, it takes quarters. It's not something you can spin up overnight. And I think we're going to see more and more AI in the product over the next few years. But again, pilots are different than production grade products.
And I guess allied to your background in analytics, I think we've all seen the phrase insights to action has been the industry's promise for a decade, and now agentic automation can be that vehicle of orchestration. But I
Correct.
think when you're talking about almost we are tiptoeing through trying to work out the value of agentic AI, and part of that is also the ownership. Like, is that CX? Is it
Yeah.
IT? Is it operations? So, does the current organizational structure of most businesses make this challenging, make orchestration very problematic?
Um, I guess the short answer is yes, right? I mean, I don't want to beat around the bush on this. Um, I think there's a shifting, I guess, interest in who owns CX, right? As the technology has been evolving away from traditional, SaaS-based platforms to increasingly AI-powered and agentic systems. If you go back 5 years, not even maybe 4 or 5 years now, before generative AI really became the force that it is today, the typical CX buyer and user was someone in marketing or operations and responsible for understanding how to and acting on voice of the customer, right? It wasn't necessarily a tech buyer. And the way that they used it was, again, to collect, distill, and act on voice of the customer. That is still a very big buying kind of member of when we talk about who Medallia sells to and who uses Medallia. But what's been shifting is AI is increasingly connecting to other systems. Those systems are typically owned by IT or by some sort of an application group that isn't just CX. When you start to think about agentic orchestration, for instance, we want to pull data from CRM, from Marketing Cloud, from Service Cloud systems. We've historically done that through traditional point-to-point integrations and API level applications. Increasingly, we're building MCP level, agentic sort of surfaces in our product. Other vendors are as well. The IT organizations want to understand how that architecture is shifting. So we have to talk to them. We have to share with them what we're doing. And they're increasingly at the table trying to understand how a vendor like Medallia will fit into this new emerging AI-driven architecture. The second thing is when you start to get into changing the way people use data because things are more AI-powered, you're finding that orchestration is not a fantasy anymore. It's actually something where there are specific types of workflows and actions that can be done without a human in the loop, right? Historically, I mean, let's pick up an example. Again, 5-6 years ago, if you were a Medallia customer, a major hotel, you would get feedback that says, I had a bad experience in this room. Someone would pick up the phone, call room service, they would fix the problem, and it would basically get done. Today, that feedback can come to Medallia. Medallia will automatically push it into a property management system, trigger a case. That case will then get assigned to somebody. Nobody will have read the Medallia survey or the response or the social media review. It'll get pushed in an automated way to someone who can take action. And you can imagine at scale those kind of agentic assignments and workflows happening across a wide range of systems and processes. It's already happening a little bit. It's going to happen slow, and then it's going to happen fast. And when you start to think about that, now you're thinking about workflow governance and automated management of systems and tracking and other things. And that's a whole new kind of derivative capability that we'll be layering on top. And if I'm a store manager, that's not my job, right? That's That's IT and systems and other things. So we are finding that when we talk, particularly modernizing CX programs, that we're moving beyond that traditional buyer to these other stakeholders. And it's a win-win conversation because we're learning from them about what they're doing, and they're learning from us about what we're doing, and it helps us evolve and make our products better.
No, absolutely. And I'm keen to pick your brain, your 30 years of experience, and more broadly, the way that AI is almost clarifying a lot of assumptions about customer experience. So,
Sure.
what would you say is the single biggest assumption about CX management that the industry keeps getting wrong? And is AI correcting it, or is it potentially even encoding the same mistake faster?
So, it's interesting. When I heard you were going to ask me this question, my head went immediately to NPS, right? So when you think CX historically and even today, most traditional CX practitioners kind of tightly link NPS to CX. If I'm running a CX program, I ultimately want to ask my customer, will you promote, and based on your experience, how likely are you to recommend this product or service to your friends or family? That's the ultimate question. It's the Fred Reichhold NPS survey question. And I think the rapid evolution of AI is increasingly making the NPS question less and less relevant. And so if you continue to hold on to NPS as being the ultimate question, and an individual as specific as Fred Reichhold has gone on record over the last couple of years saying NPS is no longer the ultimate question, right? And a big reason for that is if you go back, again, 15, 20 years, when companies were first digitizing surveys, they did not have the wealth of contextual information that lives in modern conversational systems, social media systems, contact center systems, right? So they had to basically sample the CX experience through that straw of the NPS question, right? That was the only signal they could get. There's so much more signal available today. It's all digital. It's all accessible to corporations that are collecting and mining this data. And AI makes it so much easier to infer loyalty, to infer satisfaction, to infer friction. If you're asking a ton of questions, you're basically kind of missing the point that you should be listening and inferring everywhere. You can always project that insight into NPS, but you don't need to ask it. Right. And if you move away from that mindset, it has to be an NPS, then you can start to think about things like, how do I use CX to correlate experience to outcomes? A good example is in the contact center, NPS is probably less important to most contact centers as where am I creating friction for my customers? When customers express things are hard to do, or it takes forever to do, or that they require multiple contacts to do. Customers will tell you that information when they talk to you, and you'll pick up those same signals by just looking at how many times someone's calling you. CX in the contact center should be about that, and then identifying the root cause. And you can use AI to do correlation analysis and root cause analysis, and we're doing that today in our product. And then saying, I'm going to spin out those friction drivers to the person that owns the product that's causing the calls, or to the website that's causing people to say, this isn't working, I have to call a human being, or to the agent, right, that just is not picking up and learning from the knowledge of customer training and then basically coaching them. That's a better way of fixing the problem than just saying, this agent has an NPS, of X. That's just not the best way to create outcome-based improvement. And the same is true in the digital domain, in the physical retail domain, and even in the product and marketing and sales domains. That's the better way to do CX today.
No, 100%. And then tied to that, of course, is the relevancy of the closed loop system that Medallia has been working on with the partnership with Ada.
Yep.
It's this idea from signal to automated resolution. It just streamlines and simplifies everything. At what
That's
point
right.
does the loop stop being CX improvement and start being a substitution of human judgment? And where do you believe we should draw the line in that context?
Yeah, that line, where that line gets drawn is moving, I think, every day, every week. But yeah, let's talk about Ada and in general, that kind of conversational automation capability, because that is an exciting area, I think, for CX today. If you look, and certainly when we look across our customer base, a large percentage of those of our customers are experimenting with or actually rolling out conversational automation tools, right? Ada is in a class of capabilities where you, instead of talking to a human as an initial contact, you talk to a very, very empathetic, smart, and kind of accessible bot. It could be a voice bot or a chat bot. And you know, the capabilities of these chatbot technologies and voice bot technologies, again, incrementally and growing, by the day. Today, most organizations are using them for tier one support, right? If someone calls, they can sort of answer a set of questions, and then where they can't, they talk to a human. My sense is that just like a contact center conversation or a human conversation over a chat platform can be wildly useful in understanding customer needs, product issues, service issues, we found as we're starting to look at some of these chatbot companies that they're another signal that's really valuable for Medallia to ingest, to analyze, and to make sense of, right? Because where the bot doesn't work, it will create friction and you'll have a negative experience, just like you would if you had a bad digital experience or a bad human experience. So we want to make sure we're driving efficiency and frictionless, high quality interactions through those channels. And we are very good at analyzing that and then making sure that the insight goes to the right part of the organization. That's going to continue to be a push. I do think the line is moving, right? That increasing these bots are going to get better and better. But you need a human backstop today, and I think you're going to need a human backstop in 2 or 3 scenarios. Scenario one is bots are not going to learn necessarily as fast as a human today, and so I think there's always going to be a point where you escalate to a human. The second is sensitive interactions. I think there's still going to be a need for a human quality management or compliance management outcome to kind of be that over the top. And then the third area is anytime you need to basically react quickly at sort of an outer loop perspective. We believe AI will help the outer loop analyst, the data science person, the product person, sort of take a look at all the information coming in through the chatbots and voice bots and say, what should I do that might be a big decision, an expensive decision, a risky decision? Today, people aren't willing to give up that big decision to a bot. And again, what that means to each individual customer is going to vary based on how big the bets are, how big the decisions are, and really how quickly their businesses change. But I'm not expecting humans to go away. I am expecting, though, the work that we do as humans to change as bots become smarter and more capable at doing the things that they're good at.
100%. It's the refinement and an evolution rather than any sort of hard and fast
Yeah.
anything being pushed away. You touched on in your answer just there about the compliance and governance side of things, and I would
Yeah.
like to end on that with my final question for you, please, Sid.
Oh, can I add one other thing on this too? There's a human nature observation, Kieran. I thought that was interesting. We've done some research on chatbots and voice bots, and one that's interesting in another one of we do a state of the customer experience report a couple times a year. In our most recent one, we actually found that 42% of consumers say human errors are more forgivable than AI errors. Right. So the standard of quality with a chatbot is, when you're talking to something that's obviously not a human, you have a very low threshold for wrong answers or a lack of knowledge. And so I do think that when you think about rolling out these technologies, it's important to annotate and listen and improve those technologies, even more so than coaching a human interaction, with a customer. So we do see that. Again, Ada being one of our first partners, but we're increasingly partners with some of the other companies in that space. There's a need for that continuous feedback loop to be part of any customer experience transformation. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. Yeah.
No, I think that is a very, very worthy addition there. And I think it ties nicely into the final question, actually, about just all that volumes of data there. And naturally, there is just, with AI, it just exacerbates, it amplifies the levels of data being produced. As AI agents are acting on this data rather than merely surfacing it, what are the kinds of liability and governance questions that boards and CX leaders aren't asking, but in your perspective should be?
I think there's a few ways to think about this. Most, again, and this is governance as, it's evolved in most corporations and organizations over the years, is fundamentally about a check on the quality and the compliance of an interaction. That check is almost always done through a combination of humans building rubrics to compare and analyze things, but then ultimately humans assessing the failing interactions, right, to figure out what to do. And the kind of the brave new frontier that we're at right now with AI is that AI is, offering to do it all, right? And so at what point do you give up control of the the compliance and the liability kind of risk management to a machine all the way. My sense is that we need to test the agents continually to figure out how they're doing. So model them out. And you see this happening in AI companies. It's increasingly going to happen in CX companies. You can't just assume you're going to roll something out and let the human customers be the guinea pig, right? You need to run a lot more testing in theoretical scenarios to make sure that under all the circumstances that you roll out something to your customers, that you challenge and test and make sure that your bots are doing well and your agents are doing well. The second is continue to identify accountability and traceability. So oftentimes the interaction where you find the compliance or governance risk is a result of some failure or problem somewhere else in the customer journey. So I think being able to understand what product defect or service defect or digital or other prior experience defect is causing the escalation, and make sure you quickly understand who's responsible. The analogy I would make, again, in a similar but different domain, is AI is being increasingly used to do software quality automation, right? And it's not enough to find the bug. You have to find out what caused the bug, right? And the same is true in CX. You need to have AI to find the traceability back to the source and make sure you assign that action to the source, not just say, here's an issue and here's where it failed, because it often may be triggered by something earlier in the journey. And then the third thing I would just ask is, make sure that you've got a culture of continuous improvement, right? And this is true. It's been true in CX going back, since as long as I've been in it. But don't just look to kind of play a game of, I don't know if you know the term whack-a-mole. It's this old game that used to be in arcades where you had a mallet and you hit a mole that was coming up on the display and the more moles you hit, the higher your score. CX is, to some extent, a game of whack-a-mole because you're trying to fix and find problems. But your goal should not just be to be operating at the same level. It should be able to kind of drive continuous improvement. The number of problems should be going down. And if all you're doing is keeping up, you're not actually reducing the workload, you're not fundamentally changing your governance profile, your risk profile. So a big and again, this has been true before AI, but it's increasingly true now because you want to make sure you're not just keeping up, you're getting ahead of negative experiences, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There's that famous phrase that a relationship needs to be like a shark. It needs to keep moving forward unless it dies. And I imagine
that's exactly right.
CX businesses are exactly the same.
100%, 100%.
Well, this has been terrific. So thank you so much, Sid, for being here today.
Very good. I appreciated the conversation. Good conversation. Thanks.
And if you enjoyed this video, please give us a like, share, and subscribe to CXM, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.